Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and this is hands down the most common question I get about paint pens. What's the difference between water-based and oil-based, and which one should I use for my project? In this video, I'm gonna break it all down for you. Which one is better, which one you should use for your project, how to remove them, and all the things. All right, for the purposes of this video, I'm using Sharpie oil and Sharpie water, but there are a lot of other brands out there of both oil and water-based pens. Essentially, we're just talking about the properties of each one, and so it's great to compare two of the exact same brand. I've also got a piece of glass here to show you on, because for those of you who are brand new to stuff like this, paint pens are what you would use on surfaces like glass or mirrors or wood, or acrylic, like unconventional surfaces. They're not pens you would typically use on paper. So for example, I use these for people's seating charts or their welcome signs for their weddings or big window displays for businesses and stuff like that. So we're gonna touch on the three most important properties of both of these types of paint pens. The three most common things that people wonder. Number one, how durable are they? So how do they stand up to being touched or scratched? If people walk by and swipe them, is it going to come off and that kind of thing? Number two is how are they to actually use? So are they streaky? Do they dry quickly? Are they easy to use or hard to use? That kind of thing. And number three, how hard are they to remove from these surfaces? And just in general, how do you remove them from the surfaces? So to test that, let's start from the beginning. These are both brand new paint pens. They're still in the packaging. And they work the exact same way. So I'm just gonna open them up here. If I take the top off of both of them, you can see the tips are the exact same on them and neither of them have been started yet. So they work, again, the exact same way. You just have to shake them pretty well. I should probably have the top on for that step, actually. So yeah, you wanna shake them pretty significantly. And then again, they start the exact same way. So I'm gonna do these at the exact same time and we're gonna see which one starts quicker. So essentially you're just gonna push down, like these tips push in and you're just gonna push them down on your surface. Sometimes I'll hold them for a second to get it to run a little bit quicker. And when I do this, I actually rotate the pen as I go. Okay, so right off the bat, the water is starting quicker. Let's see how long it takes for the oil to catch up. All right, so the water-based is ready to go. So that's one pro, it starts faster. Oil-based is taking quite a bit longer, actually. All right, here we go, it's starting. There we go. All right, so I've got both started. Now I'm just gonna wipe that off because I don't want that on my glass. I'll talk more in a second about how you can remove these. When they're wet, it's totally easy to remove them like I just did. They were still both really wet, so I just wiped it off with a dry paper towel, but we'll get into how to remove them when they're dry. Okay, so now I'm gonna write a word in both. I'm gonna do one in water-based and one in oil-based, and we can see about the streakiness and all those things. Okay, I'm gonna start with the water-based first. And I think I'm gonna write the word welcome because that's what I generally have to write on welcome signs with paint pens like this. Now, if you've ever worked with paint pens before or you've heard me talk about them, when you're working with paint pens like this, it's best if you're doing calligraphy to thicken the strokes as you go because paint pens dry pretty quickly. So I'm seeing like some mild streakiness with the water-based, which is really actually quite normal. Lots of people think they should have absolutely zero streaks with their paint pens, but it's just not realistic. All right, so I didn't have to shake or push down at all with the water base. It was running really well for me to write that entire word. And the streakiness again is mild, like I can see a little bit, but it's pretty good. So that's the water base. Now I'll write the exact same word with the oil. And I'll be honest, I notice a little bit less streakiness with the oil. Again, I can still see it a little bit because you're never gonna not see streaks at all. And I'll say I also feel like I need to shake and press down. So I just have a surface on the side here that I'll push down and just kind of get the ink flowing a little bit. So that's one difference with the oil I noticed right away is I need to depress it a little bit more. But once I do, it runs really well. And I can also say that the oil dries a lot faster. So you can almost see where I took that pause. Like this part is drier and this part's wetter. And so ideally this will dry to look just like that first part. But if you stop with oil, you can kind of see where you restart. So that's one of the things, it dries faster. Oh, and that's another thing is just to, I should have said this at the beginning, with oil and water-based Sharpies, oil's the pink one and water's the blue one. The easiest to remember is that the water is the blue one. So I'm gonna just put these lined up so we remember which one's which. But yeah, overall, I would say that in terms of being used, the water-based runs a little bit better. It's a little bit juicier. The oil-based is slightly less streaky, but it dries faster, so you have to work faster. And overall, if we look at them back to back right now, you can see the water-based is a little bit whiter, like it's a little bit more opaque than the oil-based. Let's put this on black paper. You'll be able to see my camera above me, but that's okay. And you can see the difference a little bit more here. So the water-based one is a little bit darker white and the oil-based is a little bit lighter white. So overall, I think in terms of that, the water-based is winning so far. But where the oil starts to win is in being touched and being smudged and removal. So let's get into that next. But before we do, I want to really wait for this to dry. So I'm going to wait about 5 minutes. I'm just going to stop the camera and then I'll restart it in a second. But just so you know, I'm going to let this dry for at least 5 minutes before I try and touch it. All right, it's been a few minutes of drying time, and realistically, I could have swiped my finger across both of these and the oil probably wouldn't have had an issue with not being dry because, like I said, it dries really fast. But the water sometimes takes a little bit longer because it is like a little bit runnier and juicier. So it's been about 5 minutes, and now I want to test what happens when I touch it or when I scratch it, and you'll see the difference between the water and the oil. So let's start with just touching both of them. So I'm just running my finger across. And I'm not being super gentle. I'm pushing on it with just the pad of my finger, and neither of these will come off from doing that. So no worries with it being touched for either of these. Like even if I rub my finger against them, it's no problem. But the real test comes with scratching it. So if I use my nail and I scratch across the water-based, you can see it comes right off pretty easily with my nail. Versus, let me just clean off my nail here a little bit, versus oil-based doesn't scratch. So that is one of the key differences between water and oil-based. Oil-based is quite a bit more durable on a window. So even though it's not quite as bright white, it's more durable. So it's kind of a trade-off. Now let's see what happens with a paper towel. If I were to kind of scrub with a paper towel, the water-based comes off pretty easily. And it scratches really, like here I pushed pretty hard for that W at the beginning. Here I'm just kind of rubbing it on top and it doesn't do anything, or it scratches a little bit, but it doesn't fully come off. Versus the oil, again, I can push pretty hard with it on that W, nothing happens. And if I just go really lightly around it, nothing happens at all. Which, while we're on this topic, if I talk about this a little bit, if you're doing glass or if you're doing a mirror or something that would get smudges on it, like a seating chart, for example, and your hand, like the pad of your hand is resting on it while you're working, you're gonna get smudges all over it. And it's really, really annoying with water-based to go back and clean off those smudges when you're finished, Versus oil-based, if you do it in oil-based and you have smudges on your mirror, you can go over it with a paper towel afterwards, and it's not gonna ruin your writing, but it's gonna get rid of all the smudges. So that's a really big benefit to the oil-based. Okay, the next big difference is removal with actual cleaners. So first, let's start with water. This is just my water bottle. I'm just gonna put a little bit of water on my paper towel, and let's use it on the water-based first. Again, it comes off super, super, super easily with water. But if I do the same thing on the oil, nothing happens. So oil-based stands up to water. So that's one big benefit. Next, let's try with Windex. So I got Windex on my paper towel, and of course, it removes the water-based. So basically, water-based can be removed just by scratching it, or with a dry paper towel, or with water, or with Windex. It's pretty easy to remove with whatever cleaner or even just dry stuff you want to use. Versus, if I use the same paper towel with Windex over top of the oil, nothing. So again, if we go back to you using oil on a mirror or glass or something and you have smudges, you can literally put Windex over top and get rid of the smudges, but it won't damage your writing. I still tell people to be careful with this because if you scrub hard enough, it'll come off. But if you're just lightly putting it on top and removing smudges, it's no problem. It stays on for the oil. So if that's the case, how the heck do you get the oil off of your surfaces? The answer is with alcohol. So you can use rubbing alcohol or acetone, which is basically nail polish remover. Some people say you can use coconut oil. I find that doesn't work super well for me, but if you're going the all natural route, you can do it and you just have to scrub pretty hard. Or you can use a straight blade and you can actually, like, it won't damage your glass or your mirror if you have a nice straight blade and you can just chip it off. I sort of usually use a combination of alcohol and a straight blade, especially if I'm doing something really big. I'll use a straight blade because it takes forever to use alcohol. But let me just demonstrate alcohol with paper towel. So this I just got at the dollar store and I like it because it's got a pump on it. So I'm just wetting my paper towel and the alcohol takes off the oil right away. I will say sometimes alcohol leaves a little bit of streakiness on glass. So after I use the alcohol, I'll go back with Windex and take off the streaks. So long story short, which one is the winner? That's really why you're here, right? You wanted to know which one's better. Well, there isn't really an answer because like you saw in this demonstration, they both have their pros and cons. The water-based is really juicy, really easy to use. It runs really well. It's more opaque. The oil-based is less opaque and less easy to use because it dries faster, but it stays on longer. So let's say you had a client who has windows on their storefront and they're worried that people might go up and scratch at it. Well, you wouldn't want to use water-based because it scratches off. So you would use oil-based. But if you're doing a sign for somebody that's going to be up high and you know it's not going to be scratched, it might just get touched while they're putting it up. And so you're not super concerned with that. Then you could use water-based because it's going to be a little bit more opaque and a little bit easier to work with. It's also easier to remove. So if your client's really worried about having to spend a lot of time doing removal, water-based. But now that you have the pros and cons of each one, you can definitely make decisions based on what the client wants and how durable it needs to be and how easy it needs to be removed. All right, so there you have it, the quick answers on oil versus water-based paint pens. The last thing I'll say about all of this is that if you're interested in more stuff about signage, so obviously like tools like we talked about today, but also everything from how to make your signs to how to run a business making signs like this, I'm currently writing a full signage course and you can find it at www.signingupcourse.com. As I record this video, I'm still in the process of making the course, but if you're watching this in the future, it's probably already out and you're welcome to go and check it out. So signingupcourse.com. So I think that's it for now, but I'm gonna link you to another signage related video next that I think you'll like, and I'll see you over there.